Hello, listeners. Welcome to part 2 of our interview with longtime drummer and friend of Weird Al Yankovic, Jon Bermuda Schwartz. In this segment, he talks about meeting Weird Al, working with producer Rick Derringer, as well as their current Ill-Advised Vanity Tour. Enjoy! There was one scene, though, that I felt like it did pull from a touch of reality, and that was the scene where there's the pool party at Dr. Demento's, and your character is playing the accordion case as the song starts, which seems to harken back to your original meeting with Al. Kind of talk a little bit about the original version of how you and Al came to meet.
Well, you can't get around the accordion case on that song. I mean, that's just what it is. This was not like an opportunity of, oh boy, let's finally do the Queen version of the song and do it right. It's like, no, that the accordion case version is the right version. Right. And we re-recorded that. I had to write out the arrangement for it just to make sure I got it exactly right. Now, I wasn't able to use the original accordion case because I beat the heck out of it on tour. I took it on tour like once or twice and just smashed it up. And I still have it, but it's not playable. And I eventually, while we were still doing that on the road, I eventually went to a few other cases. But I had to source a case that would sound like that. And I found a drum case, like a nice suitcase for one of my snares. And it was the right size. And I thought, well, that's a good start. And I took the drum out and I put it down on the ground and I started beating on it. I said, this sounds like the old one. So I had I brought that into the studio and recorded with that. And one of the fans had put together they had edited a little bit of a mashup of the original version and the re-recorded version. And one thing you notice is that Al's voice is almost exactly the same. But the thing I noticed is that both of the suitcases sounded the same. I had nailed the sound of awesome. That, and but that was cool to see him do that. And it was maybe a move that only I caught. But there's a different way that I play that. And there's like every fourth beat or something, I slap the sides of the case. Sort of like a backbeat kind of a thing. And that's just something I did in the studio the night I met Al, and I'll get to that in a sec. But it was cool to see him. They had sort of a shot, and they had a little bit of the suitcase, but when it came time for that beat, you could see his arms go out and slap the side. I said, he gets it. Tommy knew what I did. Yeah. But in meeting Al, well, I should go back and say that back in the 70s, everybody who was in junior high or high school listened to the Dr. Demento show. And he was originally, for us, he was on the air just in Los Angeles. He wasn't syndicated yet, so nobody really around the country knew about him yet. But in the early 70s, I had sent in, Dr. Demento had a contest to send in a recording of a song that was very popular on the show. In fact, it was constantly voted as the number one song. It was a song called Pico and Sepulveda. It was an older recording, I think, from the 40s. And it was ridiculous because it was always the number one song. So he, in early 1973, pulled the song. He says, okay, we're going to run a Pico and Sepulveda contest. And we want all of you musicians out there or whoever to send in your version of the song. And the first prize, the number one entry, will receive a 78 record of Pico and Sepulveda by Felix Figueroa. And I forget the actual artist's name, but he went by Felix Figueroa on there. So, of course, me and some of my buddies, put together this version, sort of a horn version, because all I knew back in high school, I knew horn players. I really didn't know guitar players. And so we had like a French horn and trumpet and a saxophone. Saxophone player was Richard Elliott, who I went to school with. Richard became a very well-known sax player. Mm-hmm. I mean, if sax aficionados name their top 5 sax guys, you probably got, Kenny G is in there and stuff like that, maybe Clarence Clemens, but Richard Elliott will be in there. So I went to school with him. A guy on flute named Jeff Rona. Jeff went on to score a bunch of TV show things and movie things. Jeff also worked for Roland and was on the committee that invented MIDI.
Huh.
back
Oh my
in
gosh.
'83. So he became quite a celeb.
Sure.
Another guy on trombone, Gary Feldman, became this is much I know I'll get to Al, don't worry. Became like a top anesthesiologist here in LA, and is now on the board of anesthesiologists for Southern California. I don't know, something like that. And he said something very funny. I said, when I learned what he did, I said, "Oh, you put people to sleep?" He says, "No, I wake them up." So very funny. And if I had a drum with me, I would have gone boom, boom. Anyway, so short story long. So we sent in our recording of it, and it didn't have vocals on it. It started out of us singing Pico and Sepulveda, and it kind of leads up. And then we just did an instrumental after that, because I don't think anybody really wanted to sing it. And we came in second. We came in second place out of like 100 entries. And Demento actually used our song for his theme song for a little while, because it didn't have lyrics in it, and he could talk over it at the opening of the show. And so that was very, very cool. We thought, oh, this is really cool. So short time later, we did another recording, the Ballad of Woodsy Owl, and sent that in, and he played that too. And a little more time went by, and some of my friends and I got together again, and recorded a song called Mr. Ghost Goes to Town. And he played a few old versions of that on the show. And he played that too, typically on Halloween. And we thought, oh, that's really cool. So this is like 1975, I think. And that's the last thing we had sent to him. And a few years later, and this is through my brother, who one of his bandmates, and my brother was in the Neil Diamond band at the time, and one of his bandmates, Tom Hensley, piano player, was friends with Dr. Demento, and somehow got us invited down to come see him do a show at KMET here in Los Angeles. Come see him do a show live, and to meet him. I thought that'd be really cool. Considering he played some of my stuff earlier on, and so we came down. We saw the show like that. Anyway, Demento that night, whatever night it was, he asked me if I wanted to come down, another time and do an interview and talk about having. This is 1980. Talk about having sent stuff in early on and getting it played on the show, because by this time, there was a lot of homemade music on the show. But at the time, I was maybe only the second only person to have his homemade stuff played on the show. And I thought, oh, I'd love to do that. And I came back, and it was September 14th, 1980, and Al was there that night. And Al was already a bit of a celebrity on the show. And he was there that night. He'd come down from school up north in San Luis Obispo, and he would come down on Sundays and hang out at the show, answer phones, read PSAs on the air, sometimes play some music, whatever. And Al had just written a song that weekend. In fact, he had been out sort of camping with Demento and some of the other Dementites. And then they all showed up at the show for the Sunday night. And he had written a song. He had written another one, Rides the Bus. And that was the night I was there. And he had originally asked one of the other Dementites, Bill Burke, if he wanted to, beat on the accordion case or something, while he was going to play the song on the air. And Bill was kind of hesitant about it. And I either volunteered, or Bill asked me, or Al asked me, but whatever it was, I ended up playing it. And then when we were done, we played it kind of in the middle of the top 10. There was a little gap in there, and Demento had rolled tape on it, and that became a single. Now, I'll get to that in a second. But Al, and then there's another thing going back to Pico and Sepulveda, but I'll tell you about that in 2 seconds. So after we were done, we played on the air. I said to him, I said, that was, that's a lot of fun. You should have a band. I'll be your drummer. And he said, okay. Not even knowing me at all, except that I just did an interview talking about some of the things I'd sent in and talking about, the bands I had been in. So he knew I was a drummer, at some point that evening. Anyway, that's how I met Al. So two things. First, I'll get to another one, Rides the Bus, in a second again. But it turns out that Al had also sent in a version of Pico and Sepulveda back in 1973. That was the first thing he had ever sent in. And nobody's ever heard it. And I don't know how it happens that Al didn't manage to keep a copy of it. Maybe that hadn't occurred to him that he would like to have a copy and to send, Demento the original, or the other way around, so he could keep a version of what he had done. Yeah. But there are no versions of that. And what happened, and I didn't find out till much later, and Dr. Demento himself told me, he says, well, Al gave me the tape at, I did an appearance at his school at Linwood High, and he gave me the cassette then and I put it in my trunk, and then I sold the car, and the tape went with it. So the tape, and I think Demento said I didn't have the heart to tell him he had missed the deadline, but whatever the case, so the tape went with the car and is gone forever. I'm sure. I'm sure whoever found the tape either threw it out immediately or listened to it and then threw it out, and so it never got. Nobody's got a copy of that. That is the great lost tape of all time, because that was the very first thing. Yeah, that was the very first thing that he had sent Demento, and that was the very first occasion that I had something to send to Dr. Demento. Anyway, so we recorded this, another one, we played Another One Rides the Bus. There was a tape of it, got made. Well, first thing that happened is, by this time, by 1980, Dr. Demento was syndicated. He had been syndicated for the last 4 or 5 years before that. And he was being heard, across the country, in Canada, Armed Forces, radio services, I think maybe overseas in some cases. So, he's got a much bigger audience than just LA. And the syndicated show was not just the LA show that was, sent out, and then played, a week or two later. It was actually a different show, but based very much on the theme of the show, and with, I think the same top 5 or top 10 or whatever he was doing then. And that was a 2-hour show that would go out to all these other stations, like 180, 190 stations across the country. Mm-hmm. So within a few weeks, this Another One Rides the Bus that got played live that night, in LA, was included in the a syndicated show that aired a couple of weeks later. So now that's being heard in a lot of different markets. But the thing that happened was, a lot of the radio stations would play Dr. Demento like late in the weekend, like not just LA on a Sunday night. Anywhere else usually got played late on a Sunday night. Mm-hmm. Many of these stations in the bigger markets, in any markets, would have a morning drive time wacky DJ team or sure. something. Yeah. The morning zoo, whatever it was. Yeah. And they would often, the stations that ran the Dr. Demento show, those DJs would go in, the producer of the show would go in, listen to the previous night's Dr. Demento show to find some wacky songs to play. Mm. Well, the night that Another One Rides the Bus aired on the syndicated show, the next morning, the song was getting played in morning drive time in major markets, and which was huge. Sure. And that led to a huge leap in popularity for Al, who is now getting heard by people that maybe didn't listen to the Dr. Demento show but are hearing the song anyway, thanks to on their way to work or whatever. So the song became a single. Things with Al got rolling. Al got a manager. We appeared on the Tomorrow Show. Things really got moving. That was a huge step. Not to discount My Bologna, which was out on Capitol Records a year before. Mm-hmm. But that was everything he did was a big step forward, it seems. Every new album and new parody became a big step forward. It kept escalating. And I mean, I got to see that very early on, how this thing that we did just for fun, proliferated across the country and became very popular. And TK Records, which was Casey and the Sunshine Band's label, mm-hmm. I think that was they put that single out in early 1981, and I think it was the very last thing they did. I don't know if it was, they closed their doors. I don't know if it was because of that or if it was just a coincidence, but I think that might have been their very last release. And it was pretty cool, though. It was very cool to be part of this as it was happening. And it wasn't too much longer that we did, in fact, start to try and put together a band. And, within about a year and a half, we had Jim and Steve lined up just in time for the first album, and it has not changed since.
Very cool.
So that was a short story long. Sorry, I could have just said, I got an interview on the Dr. Demento show, and Al was there, and we recorded a song and decided I would play drums for him for the next 42 years. That would have been more merciful. But there are a lot of aspects to everything that I've done with Al, and every answer sort of requires a more background information, because there's just a whole lot that's gone on that's amounted to what this has all become, not only for him, but certainly for him, but for me as well, who basically been along for the ride and been able to keep up with him with his agenda for recording songs that are beyond what my capabilities were, and I had to grow with him, and I'm glad I was able to keep up.
Yeah. Awesome.
Quick question about that first, album. I didn't realize this when I was younger, but Rick Derringer was the producer he was in the McCoys. He was, had a Hoochie Coochie, what was it?
Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo.
Hoochie Coo, along with work with, among many other artists.
Oh, yeah.
Since he was like the first producer, were you a little bit like seems really interesting pairing, I guess is.
It is, and there's a story behind how that happened.
Oh.
Of course there is. Well, first I should say that when Jim and Steve came along, actually Steve came along first, in time for the first album, and we knew who Jim was. He wasn't quite on board. He must have shown up literally as we were beginning to record, because he didn't rehearse with us. He didn't record the album, most of it. Rick Derringer recorded most of the guitars on the album. So that first album was me and Steve J on bass and Rick Derringer on guitar. I mean, I did an album with Rick Derringer. That was pretty cool. And Al played some accordion too, that Al guy. And Rick continued to produce the following 5 albums. So I think he produced everything through UHF in 1989, and then his contract was up. Well, Al became the producer after that. He's got a keen eye and a keen ear. He became a very good producer. He became a very good director after being involved with so many videos, and he took the reins on a lot of those things. So the way we encountered Rick was in seeking permission for one of Al's parodies. Al early before the albums was starting to realize he needed to get permission to put stuff out, because we had done a parody of the Beatles' Taxman called Pac-Man. We did that in December of 1981, and it got played a bit on the Dr. Demento show, and got a lawyer from George Harrison's people, like got a cease and desist from George Harrison's lawyers, and said, don't do that. So Al thought, I guess a good idea to get permission on stuff now. And the very next thing to come up was I Love Rocky Road for I Love Rock and Roll. Now, in getting permission, it's not always getting permission from the artist, because the artist isn't always the writer. Joan Jett did not write that song. She had the hit with it, but she was not the first to do it, and she was not a writer. So there were a couple of writers on that, and one of them was a guy named Jake Hooker. And Jake was, it was a group called the Arrows. And somewhere online, I know on YouTube, there's a version of the Arrows doing I Love Rock and Roll. And it's not too dissimilar from Joan Jett's, although Joan's is a lot slicker. And it's a lot different with a girl singing it than with the guys, guy group singing it. So in getting permission from Jake, and I guess he was one of the writers who was easiest to reach first, Jake said, yeah, that sounds good. I've Rick Derringer is one of my clients. We'll get him to produce it. We'll get some studio time, and so basically through Jake and through Rick, we got some spec time at Cherokee Studios here in LA, famous, very busy studio. And we went in and we cut the first album, on spec, meaning nobody got paid. Not even Rick, I don't think. Not then, he didn't. And that became, and then no label. There was no label yet. We just had, 10 or 11 songs or whatever it was. And then came the job for Al's manager to shop the record, to find a label. And eventually he did. I think by the end of 1982, he, Al and Jay and the Scotty brothers signed a recording contract. Of course, we already had the recording, but they pointed out quite, astutely, and said, well, some of this stuff is quite old. I Love Rock and Roll is a little dated at this point as well. The parodies have to be really, it's a timing thing, for the most part. And if the song isn't correct timing, like doing Yoda for Lola, taking an almost 10-year-old song or whatever, at least the Yoda thing was current, or Or again with the Star Wars thing, American Pie was a fairly old song by the time we did The Saga Begins, but again the theme of the song was current. So there has to be some current tie-in. So they said, we need you to record, another song or two. We want to put out, I think, albums. The deal was for 12 songs per album. So the new parody that came up was Ricky, a parody of Tony Basil's Mickey, which again, she was not the writer on that. That song was done by a group called Racy, Racey, and that version is on YouTube as well. And so it had to go to those people to get the permission. And this was a common theme throughout Al's career, because again, the artist did not always write the song, and you had to go to the songwriter to get permission when it came to the legalities of splitting publishing and writing and all that stuff. And that was actually a little bit of a bone of contention when Achy Breaky Song came out, because that was a real slam on both the song and kind of on Billy Ray Cyrus. And Billy was not happy with it, but it was not his song. It was like, sorry, but I went through all the right channels and got permission from the person that can say yes. And sorry that was really maybe the only song that took a very obvious poke at the artists and his song.
Yeah.
I think that's the only time that probably really ever happened. But at any rate, when with the first album, and then they needed one more song, and we did. I think we did. It was Buckingham Blues. I think was what was re-recorded, and that actually went back. That started out as a parody of the Ballad of Jack and Diane by John Cougar Mellencamp, whatever. And we have a couple of demos, and Al kept running, and I guess he had to run it by John Cougar because I'm certain he was the writer on it. And John Cougar didn't really want it. He didn't want a straight parody of it. And so we did a slightly twisted, different version, and he didn't like that either. Then we did another version, and I think it had gotten so far from what Al wanted, and that he completely changed it and changed it into an original, the Buckingham Blues. So I think we recorded that, and that gave us our 12 songs for that first album. And then a tour was planned, and it was not really our tour. It was Dr. Demento's road show, and we went out as his musical act. So, but we had a great time. I think I know that was the first time that either Al or I had really been on the road. We went and played Toronto. We played the El Macambo, famous club in Toronto, on that first tour. It was very, very cool. It was really cool. We had to do all the driving, but that's okay. Bands do that, when they're starting out. There was no budget to, hire drivers or buses or, crew, even, somebody to make sure that things sounded good from night to night. God forbid, you'd want to have some consistency. Well, it was expensive, so we just sort of winged it, and it was okay, and it worked out, and it was, we did it right. We grew up with the whole touring thing, by starting out very grassroots, and into a pretty slick organization, and very consistently great shows, even with all of the technology that exists, and back in the day, all the mishaps that could occur thereof. We made it. Nobody asked for their money back, and had they wouldn't have got it anyway. So, sorry, no refunds. No, we never. There was never a show so terrible that Al really felt beholden to the audience. It's like, sometimes things happen. We got through it. We came back on stage or whatever it was, and we continued the show. And we did fine. There are worse things to happen. Ask fans of Morrissey what happens when he, one, doesn't show up for a show, or two, shows up and then walks off stage 30 minutes later, like he did here in Los Angeles at the Greek Theater in front of 6,000 people. Oh, it's cold. I have to go. Geez, you're from England. How cold does it get there? This is LA. What was it? Was it like 60 out? I'm sorry. Anyway.
My wife is a huge Morrissey fan. I pick on her all the time about it.
I hope she got to see him part of the time.
She's seen him Yeah, of many times. She dragged me once too. I must add, I've seen Morrissey in concert.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, you know what? I honestly, I don't know any of his solo work, but of course I'm familiar with the Smiths and and enjoyed that.
You mentioned about obviously those early days touring, and the book obviously speaks to that. We see so much of the visuals of those early days of being in the RV and upgrading to the bus and all that good stuff. Just for the moment, when you're out on tour back in the early 80s, you see the crowd coming in. Now flash to 2022, you see the crowd coming in. How has it changed? Is it a similar sort of vibe from the people that are coming to the shows? Is it different ages that you're seeing at the shows? What's that like?
Well, the vibe is the same. They're there to see Al. They are sure, fans. Yeah. Nobody wanders into an Al show not having any idea what they're going to see, unless one of their friends dragged them in, and is trying to convert them. But nobody just wanders in because they had nothing to do that night. So they're all on our side. Right. The demographic has definitely changed. In the early days, and again, this was via Dr. Demento. The fans of the Dr. Demento show at the time were like fans of Monty Python and the Three Stooges. It was young males, right. Seriously predominantly male. So we saw very few females in the audience, at that time, certainly through the mid 80s, very few females. And they were also mostly younger. It was mostly college age. There weren't any very young people in there. There weren't any, nobody, I would think, much past 25 or 30 for the most part. And that demo changed over the years. I don't know exactly when, but if you go to one of our shows now, well, first off, some of the younger fans then are still coming to the shows. So they're 60. Mm-hmm. So you're seeing people that rival the age of us on stage. And we're seeing younger fans as well. There's 6 and 8 year old kids out there. There's some people that brought very young, like not infants, but babies, and they'll put like ear muff protectors on them. That's the right thing to do. But I don't know that they can even, maybe they couldn't find a babysitter, or maybe the babysitter was also at the Al show that night. But it's a very wide demo, and it's very evenly split now. There's a lot of couples. It's very 50-50 male female. So it's the age range is much wider, and the gender gap has been almost eliminated, and it's almost a mainstream audience, apart from being Al fans. So that's really the big difference. It's a lot of the fans have hung in there with us, which is great, to grow up with them and them to grow up with us. But they are bringing their kids, and there are new kids coming in, and that's what will keep us going. For as long as Al wants to, really, and his statement on that is, as long as people keep paying to see me, we'll keep doing this. As long as the audience is there, we'll keep. When they go away, we go away. And as it is with any performer or actor or a business or anybody that depends on public participation, when the public stops participating, that's the end of it.
Greg and I grew up listening to you guys and continue to listen, all through our lives. And now our kids are, just on the early days of teenage years, and Greg's older boys are on the upper end of that. But, new fans, new young fans that are fans of the music. So,
well, thank you. Well, much appreciated.
Yeah.
Tell your friends.
I was just going to say that the current tour, which is the Ill-Advised Vanity Tour, plays only original songs, which I think is an absolutely amazing idea. What have been the fans' reactions when it's just original songs?
Well, a lot of the fans think the originals are better than the parodies.
I'm one of them.
Well, there you go. And we have done this tour, this theme back in 2018 as well, which is when we learned that the fan response was really good, really strong, mostly sold out shows. And that was the case on this past tour. Well, we're actually not done with it. We're continuing in the spring. The fans' reactions has been great. And the fact that we are also changing up the set list every night, we're pulling from about 37, 38 originals that we've worked up. And every night, and I'm not sure how Al accomplishes it without a lot of work, he has made sure that every night is a different set list. And there's enough songs to make enough combinations to have got us through those 133 shows. I assume. I mean, I'm not going to go and check and see if any are the same, but if he says they're not, they're not. And what that does is, one, for the fans that come to repeat shows, and there are many that do, and I'm not just talking about in the same region, but they will fly across the country and kind of tour chase, I guess. And we'll see them and it doesn't bother us. I mean, that's very cool. I mean, a lot of these fans have become friends of ours, and it's very cool to see them there. But they will come and see different shows because they know they're going to see a slightly different show every night. And although they're the same ones that would come see the regular full production show, knowing that they were going to see the same show. I mean, they would still come and see us several times. But that's like, you listen to one of your favorite albums. You don't expect it to be different every time you listen. Or you go to see a movie, you buy a DVD of a movie and you watch it, several times. You don't expect it to be different. You watch it several times because you like it. And they like the show that we do. And but in particular, this originals, the No Frills Tour, as we call it, because we're not running video, we're not using any tracks. Al has to play on a lot of these songs to fill in some of the parts. The fans love it. It was interesting when we were putting a lot of these songs together in 2018 for that tour. We hadn't played a lot of these songs live before, and in fact, some of them we hadn't even played as a band. When we're in the studio. As time went on, a lot of times we would record just drums first and get that out of the way. And if I was happy with my part, Steve would come in and do his part. And it's not, and you would never know it to listen to it. But with Al, when I say Al became a very good producer, he's really good about wanting stuff to sound exactly. He knows when it sounds exactly like it's supposed to sound. And we're on board with him as well. So, there were songs that we played that we never ever played as a group. And there were songs that, maybe we had played on early tours. And then as more and more songs, new albums came out, more songs in the repertoire became available. Some songs got cut from the list, songs we hadn't played in 30 or 35 years that we had to relearn those. So there were a lot of rehearsals. And for us, a lot of rehearsals is like 10 to learn, like, it was like 45 or 50 songs or something.
Wow.
And that's for some bands, I don't understand how some bands will go in the studio and rehearse for 2 months. I don't get it. I don't know what they're working up that they don't already know. I mean, even if you're teaching a bunch of musicians that didn't ever play the parts to begin with, it's not that hard to learn. You give somebody the record and they learn their part, and you teach them maybe some endings or some different arrangements, and they know the song. You don't need 2 months to do that. I don't get it. We went through and did all that stuff, Again, we were familiar with the songs, but a lot of this stuff we had never played. So we had to learn a lot of that stuff from scratch. Coming back on this most recent tour, a lot of the songs were revived, and the rehearsal schedule was cut like in half because it was just more of a refresher rather than having to learn things. Although there were some songs that we had to go over and learn. There were some one aspect also, and this was a favorite of the fans, is for the encore, we would play a straight cover song on these Ill-Advised tours. Yep. Now, in 2018, there were like 77 shows. We did 77 different cover songs.
Oh my gosh.
We had to learn. We didn't learn them up front. We learned them as the tour progressed, but we had to play 77 different songs, some of which were not familiar to everybody, and some of which we all knew. I mean, we all know. I saw her standing there by the Beatles or something. I don't know if we did that, but I'm just saying, that those kind of songs we all know. On this the 2022 tour, we cut that number down by quite a bit, and so that's a lot of stuff to go through. We pulled out a bunch of songs, added a few new ones, but we got it down to, I think, about 45 different covers, and that we would play each one over the course of the tour. They would each get played, up to 3 times, and that would cover us for 133 dates. And so we were, there was a lot less rehearsal for that, but every day we would do a sound check, which consisted more of us working on the cover song that we were going to do that night, because that wouldn't have been a song that we would have possibly, like one of our other originals that we would have played the night before or played, 3 or 4 times that week already. This was something that just comes out of the blue. Maybe we hadn't played it since 2018. In the beginning of the tour, a lot of these songs were already 4 years since we had played them. So we would rehearse those, and that was our sound check, was going through and just working on whatever the cover was that night. And very often we would do it one time and just look at each other and go, okay, we got it. We remember, or we nailed it, or whatever it is. And so these tours are a lot of fun for us, and a lot of fun for the fans. And we do it for the fans. We don't do this for us. If we did, we wouldn't put ourselves through the rigorous travel and expense of. We would just find a rehearsal room and sit and play for each other, and and just have a good time and go and have a pizza for lunch. And we do it for the fans, and we have a very great appreciation for them. A lot of artists sort of think that just goes along with what they do, but it doesn't. Because the fans can lose interest, or the band can stop, being good, and in our case, neither has happened. We haven't had any, and again, this touches on the age thing. I don't think we sound, if anything, we sound better than we did 30 years ago, as younger players. I think we sound as good or better. And, the audience appreciates that too. They know when you start to get old and can't play anymore that it's time for everyone to pack it in. And unfortunately, the artist will be the last to know when he goes and plays a theater and only a few hundred tickets have sold. I think that's a good sign. Well, I don't know if that will ever happen with us. It just keeps growing and growing, and we're very grateful for that. So the fans love what we do, and we appreciate that.
I just wanted to say thank you to Jon. This has been awesome. Thank you so much for the insight into the past 40 years of your history at Weird Al, and it's been very cool. And thank you for taking the time to hang out with us.
No, it's my pleasure. I know some of my answers are long-winded, but I mean, there are very few simple answers in my life. There are very few yes or no questions for me. Every answer requires a couple of other responses to sort of set it up. So I apologize for being long-winded.
No, not at all.
No, we appreciate it. And it's really been a joy to have the opportunity to talk to you. And, just in wrapping up, do you want to share any details of the upcoming tour, or any other specifics about how people can purchase the book that's best for you?
Nope. Okay. Oh, see, now you get the short answer. No, you know what? The book is available anywhere books are available, online at the Big A Company, or the Big B&N bookstore company, or or the Big WM, the Walmart or Target, or anywhere that sells books sells Lights, Camera, Accordion, it makes a great gift. So if this is out before Christmas, cool. If not, somebody's birthday is coming up. If not, they're going to have a Christmas every year for a while. So yeah, anywhere online sells the book, and I think everyone would enjoy it.
Awesome. Well, thank you again.
Well, you're very welcome. Thank you.
Well, Tim, I must say that was a lot of fun. Jon was such a cool guest. He answered all of our questions and really provided some funny insight into the world of Weird Al.
Yeah, Greg, that was awesome. Jon was super down to earth, and we thank him for taking the time to come on our show.
Jon was such a great guy that we talked for almost 2 hours. He even played a brief game of NBA with us.
That's right. And if you would like to hear the full interview, go to latchkeydads.com for the link, as well as photos from the interview.
And don't forget to check out Jon's new book, Lights, Camera, Accordion, eye-popping photographs of Weird Al Yankovic, 1981 to 2006, available pretty much everywhere.
Nice.
Can't get enough Latch-Key Dad content? Well, check out latchkeydads.com.
That's right, Greg. On our website, we've got a plethora of photos from each episode, as well as other interesting links to content that we talk about on the show.
Yeah, Tim, I really enjoy all the pictures that you put up there, as they really bring the episode home.
Yeah, I guess I'm not afraid to show those embarrassing photos of my childhood. So, yeah, we encourage you to check out the website, latchkeydads.com, for all that content.
Excellent. And if you have a moment, check out our shop page, where we've got really cool keychains for sale. If you don't know what to get your dad for Christmas, the holidays, Father's Day, birthday, check it out. It's a cool gift. Tim,
Did you know that listeners should like, review, and subscribe to the Latch-Key Dads podcast?
No. But now I know.
No,
Knowing is half the battle.